I'm Naylor, and I want to focus on you guys, but just so you know who I am, my pronouns are he, they. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Misfit Ventures, Canada's first and only LGBT venture capital fund. We just went public about, so really grateful to be in the company of our peers in the audience. So let's kick it off though. So I think both of you are very near and dear to my heart and everybody else in the audience, and I distinctly remember my first connection to you being in university, sitting in my basement bedroom, clinging to your lyrics as I was like fearing coming out as being a lesbian at that time, and was so relieved when I found connection and community through what you did. And obviously over time, fast forward 10 plus years, you've done a lot of different things, which is incredible. Built a foundation, written books, graphic novels like Crush, and just binged your TV series again, and your documentaries. So, but that said, I know with you just released this book, so maybe we can dive into that with some Q&A and talk a little bit about that. And also, audience is welcome. We have a mic going around, so I'll kick it off. But I'd love to know a bit more about like what your process has been on your journey of shifting mediums into writing, and more specifically writing with an autobiographical narrative, and also integrating other forms of art like drawing. I'd love to know a bit more about that journey and how it's manifested itself.
Well, as you pointed out, we do a lot of different things, but music was our main vehicle for 18 years professionally, or 20 years actually, as adults. And I think in 2018, I don't want to say we were burned out because we've now become even busier, but I think we were done just making music and touring all the time. I think there was a desire to tell stories in other mediums. We went out actually and tried to sell a podcast, and at the same time we sold a book, and so that's how we got into books. That just happened first. And I think the memoir experience was really a good jumping off point for us, but Crush and Junior High, our graphic novel series, they're kind of auto-fiction. I mean, they've been modernized and fictionalized to some degree, but I think they're very much still based on our lives. And I think it's just, it's allowed us to create content for a different generation, which feels really exciting. And I think it pushes Sara and I to collaborate in a way we haven't before. And music, that's a very solo sport. And in books, we really have to work together. So I think, it's just, I think like everybody else on this planet, instead of learning how to make sourdough, we were like, how do we do a graphic novel? That's interesting. I don't know.
One thing I heard recently that I thought was really interesting was Zadie Smith was being interviewed by Ezra Klein. If none of you listen to Ezra Klein, I love his show, and they were talking about specifically they were talking about how music is all about, well, Zadie was saying music is all about breaking rules. Like you can be really abstract and you can be really exploratory, and I looked at it almost like she was saying, like, you don't even have to be good at music. I mean, I'm reading between the lines, but like it's true, I think, to be sort of, to put your voice and your energy into music. Sometimes you can end up like us, where I don't necessarily think we're naturally gifted musicians, but we do have really interesting instincts when it comes to writing and melody and lyrics, and I think we just really tried hard to become musicians, and then we became musicians. But one of the challenges of working in these other mediums is they are not as abstract and they are not as experimental, and to learn how to tell a story in a coherent way, whether it's on TV or a documentary or a book, it's really challenging, and it requires something a little more like academic, like it feels like going back to school. It feels a little more, it's hard. Whereas like, I'm not saying that making music is easy. Making good music is extremely hard, but I think we both wanted to feel the challenge again of having to learn how to do something and involve other people who are better at it than we are, as a way to sort of like grow and elevate. And it's been so fun.
It's amazing. I love the self-growth journey. It's really inspiring. I do have more questions, but I did want to open it up to the audience. And so if there is anybody who wants to ask a question, feel free to put up your hand. No pressure. Okay.
Hi. So I know you said that you're going to take a break in 2025. But are you gonna do you have plans to do kind of any small projects or maybe work on a new album for 2026? Possibly?
Get off our back! You know, I think the short answer is that we need a break, but that doesn't, then the longer answer is when I define break, what that usually means for Sara and I is that we're just not touring, marketing, or publicly doing anything, but we're always creating. So I think when we wrap things up here in a few weeks, we're definitely going to be on a long break. So I do not expect that we'll be touring anytime soon. But we have other books that we're writing and other projects for sure. But yeah, I think we're at that weird middle-aged age where you start to be like, what is the point of my life? And assigning value to all the different things in your life and looking at your mortality and the time you have left on this planet, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing in our 40s, right? So, yeah. So, and yeah, I think we've been really, obviously Tegan is going to be making sourdough because she's brought it up in 2 different interviews, so I think she's going to be transitioning, pivoting, as they say, towards bread.
Well, I think, yeah, and I think bread is probably just like the cream on the cake, and the cake is, she's doing cake too. So a compulsive desire to create things and be in the public space, and I think we're overachievers and we need to slow down and stop. But that being said, yes, there's like a million things that we're doing.
I was gonna say too, like there's also it's funny to be in a tech space with people who will understand this so much, but our flow for like the first 10, 12 years of our career, there was a lot of downtime. I mean, I didn't have the internet in Montreal. It was just like that was normalized in that city, and I just would go off the road and be creative, except a lot of times it just meant watching like every season of The West Wing and laying on my couch and having long walks in the park, and then all of a sudden I would be like bonkers creative for like 6 weeks, and I'd be working like 16 hours a day, and then it would just be like, I guess I'll rewatch all of Band of Brothers and Sopranos, and I don't know, like I just would have these like really like restful like consumption times where I was just sort of like allowing my creativity to kind of, I don't know, render and come up with something new. And right now it feels like in this world that we're living in, it's like, I've been saying like social media is like proof of life. Like if you don't post every day, it's like they're dead. It's over. They, where did they go? What happened to them? And I just feel like that pace is so, it's creatively, it creatively murders me. It just, I hate it. So I'm like hoping that, we can kind of, it's less of like a change of life in our 40s. It's actually like I really want to go back to the way that I was sort of like pacing things out when I was younger, and we didn't have this kind of like doom and gloom feeling of like if we're not creating and making something and putting something out, then we don't exist.
Before I hand it back to the audience, I think like it's some of the greatest minds like creative solitude to kind of reach that creativity. And so, we talked about the muse of sourdough, cake, who knows what will be next, but
I'm excited to know.
Yeah, but I actually wanted to know a little bit more about like your process of finding muses, which I think changes as we go through life. By the way, like you guys are amazing for being in the photos. So, but yeah, I want to know a little bit more about how it has changed, morphed, in which ways it may have stayed the same, and also more specifically as I'm wondering if that has changed as you've changed mediums as well, if that's influenced that at all.
I think for me, what has always inspired the art that I make is it's an internal thing, and it's usually inspired by something that's happened externally, but for me, it's never been another artist necessarily. I think it's always relationships. I think so much of the art we make is about relationships, so for me, I've always found inspiration in whether it's the relationship I'm in or the relationship that I'm psychotically attached to that I can't get over, or someone else's relationship. With a lot of the music that I've written in the last handful of years was actually inspired by people around me and their stories. Someone just had mentioned that a music person was telling us that they would drop comedians in writers' rooms with musicians because they said comedians were so good at one-liners. They're really excellent at like kind of bettering lyrics, and I just blew my mind. Like, I mean,
but then I started to think about it, and I'm like, God, comedians are, first of all, the most serious and dramatic people. They're never funny in real life, and they are really excellent at getting down to the source, like getting right down to the essence of what makes something funny, or sad, or moving, or interesting. So, yeah, I've spent the last couple of years, my muses have been my friends, the people that I know that are going through tough times, and I'm constantly texting people being like, can I use this text that you just sent me as a lyric? Like, I'm really inspired by other people, which feels really refreshing, and again, maybe perhaps a sign of middle age that I've stopped focusing so much on myself and started to think about the people around me, and it's amazing to mine other people's sadness instead of my own. I'm not particularly sad anymore, so.
You're doing lots of good for the world. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So.
I used to be really inspired by people who were successful in the business, like not just popular, but like people whose business ethic or the way that they were sort of navigating their art and commerce, especially people who had longevity. Like that was really a focal point for us, and I think that's like how we, in some ways, designed and then ultimately scaled our career as we got older. But recently, I've become so interested in just people who are making, it seemed to me, are making art whether anyone listens to it or looks at it. That has become something interesting to me. Just obviously a defense mechanism because less people care about us than they used to. So, you know, it's like, okay, inevitably, less people will listen to us and come to see us play. So everything that I make, would I make it if I knew that no one would hear it or read it or see it? And I've become sort of interested in the idea of like, what is our practice as artists? Like, you know, am I an artist or am I a business person? For a lot of our career, I was very proud to sort of center this idea that, one, I'm a business person. I mean, this is ultimately why I'm out doing this part of it. If I was just an artist, and if that was the central part of what I was doing, then maybe I wouldn't let all of the business and commerce part eat up so much of my time to be an artist. So like lately I've been really wrestling with that equation again. If I really just want to go back to being creative and being an artist, then I sort of like need to look at people around me who are doing that successfully, meaning by their own standards. So I like think of like this morning I was reading this piece about visual artists who are living in New Mexico, you know, and I was like fascinated by this idea that they're like in their 80s and 90s and they've just been out in the middle of New Mexico for 30 years making art because they need to remove themselves from the sort of, they were all from New York and they were like, we needed to get clear, we needed to get away from what everybody else was doing so that, you know, so that we could make art that was authentic and to ourselves. My fear right now is that whatever I choose to do, for example, move to New Mexico and make sourdough, and then get rid of my cell phone and get one of those phones that only has text messaging, I guarantee you that when I come back online, it'll be like Taylor Swift was just in New Mexico making sourdough with a razor. I'm serious, like we're all so zeitgeisty right now. Like I don't even know if I can have an original thought, you know? Like it's just gonna be like a whole year of albums made in New Mexico while also cooking sourdough. And I'm so scared, how do I unhook my brain from what everybody else is doing?
That's really nice, I love it. All right, I'll open it back up to the audience for a question.
I love the art of this. I was wondering what the collaboration process with the illustrator looked like how much say you got in how it looked visually, or how much you just trusted the process?
Great question. Tilly Walden, who did this duology with us, is an amazing graphic artist and cartoonist and is also a twin and also gay. And when our publisher suggested her as a collaborator, we like truly could not have AI'd ourselves a version of a collaborator that would have been better suited for this. We only exchanged a couple emails with Tilly and then we went off to write the book. And for those that don't know, when you write a graphic novel, you write it as a script. So you put in a lot of description. It's, you know, stage direction and scenes, and we had no idea when we sold the book that that's how you do it. They just sent us a script and said, here's a sample script so you know how to do it. And Sarah was like, I guess I'll start writing it. And I was just like, oh my God. But when we finally handed in our script, Tilly said it was the longest script she'd ever been given, and it had the most detail that she barely had to use. Her, like she was like, there just was so much detail I barely had to even think how to draw everything. So
That part of the collaboration was very separate. We wrote the script, and then the script went to her, and then she drew the book. She gave us some sample characters to look at so that we understood what we were going to look like in the book, but mostly she worked siloed completely from us, and she was an amazing collaborator in the sense that she took the script we'd given her, even though it was an opus, it didn't really have a lot of feeling in it, which was missing from, in her opinion, the drawings and the, on the page. And so she had the brilliant idea to create these interstitials in between the chapters where Tegan and Sara are in sort of floating in space, talking to each other about their feelings, which we never do in real life or in space. And so it was kind of like free therapy too, because she really took our book and translated it into a feeling space for us. So anyway, she was amazing, she's brilliant. And it was also really exciting to collaborate in a whole new way. Like, we've never given up that much control before. I mean, in music, we always produce alongside our producers. We are always the main songwriters, if not the only songwriters. We've just been obsessive and controlling about everything we've ever done, and this has been completely and totally different in that way. So it's been an amazing experience. I think it's really inspired us to do more collaborating. So yeah, and all of Tilly's books are amazing. You should check them out if you haven't read them.
With the new documentary and being in TV and film, is there a new interest in diving deeper into that industry? And if there is, can we look forward to super awesome queer plus content like Heartstopper does?
I mean, I really, really liked working in TV, and we absolutely loved the outcome of high school. It's so beautiful. We were really disappointed that we didn't get to have a second season, and so, I'm determined that this will not be our last TV project. So we are sort of working on, thank you. That's about how many people watch high school. That's about right. Someone should asterisk everything Sara says is through a negative lens. It's not negative. It's that's the face. She's like, I know you keep. You're putting yourself down. You are also putting down me and all the other collaborators. So unfortunately, in TV right now, it's such a tough market. Like, it's really tough to get things made. It's there's certainly a dramatic change in the landscape of what's getting made, and I think we have interesting instincts and tastes, and so we're sort of floating out there right now, looking for projects that that we can help.
There actually is a great queer comic.
You have one? Okay, well, so I like that.
Yeah. There's a great queer comic called Destiny New York, and it is with Sony, and we're EPs on it. We're hoping it'll get made, but they're just creating a pilot right now for it, but it's a really great queer story, and a great queer writer has been tapped to showrun and write it, so, I mean, hopefully it happens, but we're definitely talking and taking meetings, but we're very specific about what we want to do, too. I mean, it's interesting you say, great LGBTQ content. It's funny, as a queer person, everyone assumes you must only make queer things, but I'm really just pounding the pavement looking for super straight cis het shows. Go in and just gay up, you know what I mean? So if you've got some super straight ideas out there, send them my way too.
I have a super straight idea. Have you heard of the gay agenda? Yeah. Actually, producer. Anyway. Anybody else have a question?
Hi. First of all, my girlfriend is a massive fan. She doesn't have a tattoo of your faces, so don't worry. I myself am an artist, and growing up, my mom told me not to be an artist, so I became a chartered accountant. And I started my own company for artists and accounting firm. My question for you both, and you touch base on the business aspect of your artistry. Now, there is a massive gap between being an artist and having the knowledge of your business side of your artistry, and you both have been successful. How do you navigate it, especially that you started at a very young age, and many artists are not given the tools to be able to navigate that landscape? Thank you.
That's a great question, and congratulations. And you can still be an accountant and an artist at the same time, for sure. You probably don't get too artistic with your accountant now.
You'd be in jail.
Yeah, you'd be in jail. One thing I will say, this is such a tough question because I talk forever about it, but one thing that I think Tegan and I really benefited from was
full financial transparency from our parents when we were growing up. Our parents talked about their salaries. They talked about what things cost. I think there was a sort of entrepreneurial spirit in our family. Both our dad and stepdad worked in housing companies, and so we built and sold homes throughout our childhood and adolescence, and we knew what those homes cost. We understood, we were sort of getting financial vocabulary and experience as young people, and we weren't kept from that. And I think, very early in our career, like when we were still really in high school and we started talking about things like signing legal contracts or the accounting of even our small business, we talked about it with a kind of confidence and a sort of I don't know, we weren't uncomfortable, we weren't afraid of it. And Tegan especially really had more aptitude for the numbers and for our budgets and those types of things. And we really saw that even when we were sort of confronted with this idea that, which was very popular in the late 90s and early aughts, to be a real artist, you didn't think about that kind of stuff because you were selling out or it wasn't about the money. I mean, it was absolutely about the money, in that if we didn't have money or we didn't pay our bills, we weren't going to get from point A to point B. And so, yeah, I think there was I really like to think that comfort or that aptitude really just started with our parents being open with us about what things cost, what money means, the number of hours required to work and make this amount of money, or how much I knew how much my mom's college, student loans were. I knew those things because we talked about it in our family. That is a great question. I think I just encourage all artists to understand their business, even if it's not something that comes naturally to you. I think artists of all types are often taken advantage of, or at least that's a lot of what we hear about. And I think that the power you have in your own career is to have at least basic understanding of everything. We grew up watching the same TV shows we all watch, like the behind the music, and it's like every artist being like, and then I found out I was broke. And we didn't want that, so I think we just always cared. We also were very lucky. Our first industry friend was a lawyer, and he wouldn't let us sign anything unless we could explain to him what we were signing. So he gave us a crash course in the business in the first 3 years, and him and I became quite close, and he just was like, he said, if you're paying attention and you're asking questions, you're just less likely to be taken advantage of. And I will also add that it doesn't matter the kind of artist you are, there should be pride in the fact that this is your art, it's your business, and it's what you make of it. I think nowadays everybody is doing that because of social media and influencing. We're all running small businesses, but certainly when we started, it was really gross. People were criticizing us even in the press for being, that's why our second album was called This Business of Art, because we had to pay the bills. We knew that right from the beginning, so we had a lot of awareness about that stuff.
I actually want to amend my comment. I think there's too much business, and sometimes I do think TikTok and social media have become the home shopping network. So maybe find a good balance, No, but awareness is really important. I know lots of musicians who are doing really well right now, and they're suffering because they can't make any money. And I think there should be more transparency in our business. When a band blows up, you go and see the show. You want them to have fancy production, 12 different merch designs. This show needs to sound good, and that means they need to hire dozens of people and buses and trailers and staff, and that means insurance and hotels and per diems and salaries, and it's a lot. And I think a lot of artists get into the business, don't have a clue about any of that, and then they get popular, and then they get to the end of that moment and there's nothing there, and it's because everyone around you is going to push you to spend. You have to, I feel like I would be an excellent mentor to a lot of artists, because I would just come in and be like, no, you don't need that, you don't want holograms, because the majority of your audience is just looking at you. And they just want to see you, they want you to be you. So anyway, but yeah, the business side of it, I find it very fascinating. I feel like it's been the added bonus to our career, is I love being in a boardroom telling people what to do. I love it. Thanks for the question.
Okay, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the audience that you've been writing some of the books and the films for. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, even though I'm not in junior high, but I remember those moments. I'm curious, if you can talk us through the process, or maybe why you chose to write for that audience, because I'd love to know more about that. Yeah.
I mean, I think when we wrote High School, it was Sarah's idea because everyone always wanted us to write about our career, and we just felt like that wasn't going to be that interesting. And Sarah was like, I mean, technically, if we're writing about our career, we should start our story in in high school because that's when we started our band. It's also when we came out. So when we wrote High School and we had such a big reaction to it, I think junior high was our attempt at reaching an even younger audience with a similar story, which was one of, we struggled, we didn't have it easy, but also we experimented, we broke rules, we were not always good, like I think our public image as a band has always been like, we're so nice, we're so friendly, we're Canadian, we're easygoing, we have a foundation, gay people are great, like it was, and that's fine, that's aspirational, but like we were also total dirtbags in high school, we were doing drugs and stealing and lying, and Sarah suffered with so much inner homophobia and struggled with her sexuality. I didn't come out until I'd been already experimenting with girls for years. I think we wanted to tell stories that weren't so perfect. I think if you come and see Tegan and Sara on stage, we show you a lot of those imperfections, but I think our books were our first attempt at saying, it's okay to struggle, it's okay not to be perfect, you don't have to be great at everything you do. And I just love the idea that someone would pick this book up that was young and find themselves in it, and I was shocked to know that one of the bigger benefits was meeting people in our age group and older who also picked up the book and were like, oh my God, that's what it was like when I got my first bra, and I was like, that's amazing, So I think, there's just a strong desire. I think Sarah and I just really love connection. Honestly, I think a lot of our art is just inspired by the idea that we love to look at people we don't know and talk to them. And it felt like junior high was a great way to do that with younger people. And when we went out and did the first book tour, we did some events for that age group, and they could not have given two shits about us. And that felt really invigorating. I wanted to win them over. I wanted them to see us as allies. I wanted them to feel a connection with us, and so then we just talked about Taylor Swift, and then they liked us, and it was great.
A new cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because as I'm raising this fund, I'm looking at the stats of inclusivity in the younger generation in Gen Z, and one of the things I realized is almost a third of them, at least in Canada, are identifying as LGBT. So this book, for me, strikes home hugely because it wasn't it was better than it has been in the past, but it's always an evolution, and so it's just interesting that they were like, who are you? And all of us here are just like,
it's great.
Yeah.
Sarah and I talk about this all the time. And first of all, when people don't know who we are, I think great. We still have people to try to sell ourselves to, because nothing feels more exhausting than being at it 26 years and being like, God, people must be tired of hearing from us. And then you meet a whole generation who are like, there you go. And I'm like, get ready, we have 10 albums. But I can remember being 25 and meeting 15-year-olds who are like, this is Cyndi Lauper. And I'm like, what? That's great. The evolution and the life cycle of fame and celebrity, it's great. It gives you tons of room to explore. We're constantly reinventing ourselves. I love it. But I love this new generation. I love how empowered they are, how outspoken they are. I love that so many of them are identifying on this spectrum of identities. I think it's super exciting, and I hope we can tell stories to them about our experience, because I think that while things have changed a lot, the thing I most commonly am told by that age group is that it's still really hard, they still feel really insecure and uncomfortable in their bodies, they still feel like they don't see themselves enough and they're not represented enough, and I feel like we've got lots of work to do.
I also just wanted to say too that, when we're writing for a certain age group, like the high school, like our memoir or albums or TV shows or whatever, I mean, we really are exclusively almost thinking of adults. And there's something really tricky about writing for kids, because you're not just writing for kids, you are writing for adults too. You need the support of librarians and educators, you need the support of parents and caregivers. It's so nuanced, because on one hand, you don't want to be too controversial and get banned, but that's not a bad thing, because it's really hard to get your book noticed because there's millions of books. So maybe it's not a bad thing to get banned and sort of be put on a short list, That was literally what Tilly Walden said before our last book came out. She's like, our book is not going to be in so many places because I'm already banned all across the US. And I'm like, great, I think.
It's tough. It's such a different mentality than with music, where
in some ways, music, at least the kinds of music and genres that we're interested in, they're about disruption. They're not about compliance, and they're not about, I mean, it's almost the opposite. You know, it was about coming in and saying things and making people uncomfortable and looking in ways that were provocative. And music is a disruptive form of art. At least I think it should be. And books in some ways can be that too, but not necessarily when you're writing for a 7-year-old. You know, you don't want to be like, you have to be really careful about how you sort of deliver a message of otherness to people who are so impressionable and who ultimately are going to be, you're going to be reaching their gatekeepers as much as you're going to be reaching them. So it's a really, again, sort of going back to this idea of like, music is really fun and it's exciting and you can totally change the world, but there is something exciting and challenging about working within mediums that have more rules, and books have more rules, and it's I'm not frustrated yet by it. I really like it, and I like the idea of, like, my nephew just came to visit us. He's 7, and he's a really advanced kid. He's got, he's really his vocabulary is amazing, and he reads all the time. And I gave him a copy of Junior High, while also saying to his parents, like, I know this is like too old for him, but like maybe when he's older. And he went home that week and he read it 3 times, and he's 7. And I was like, I had this feeling of like gratitude that his mom and dad let him. I mean, I don't think it's that controversial of a book, but for a 7-year-old to be reading Junior High, I was like, okay, like, so they're not uncomfortable that we talk about like our periods and like crushes. And I think my reaction and my nervousness is an example of why it's important that we're telling these stories in this space. Like, why am I uncomfortable about making my 7-year-old nephew understand me and my experiences as a kid? Like, what the hell does that say about my own, view of myself? And yeah, so anyways, it's exciting. It's an exciting opportunity to talk to multiple generations at the same time with one piece of work, one story. It's cool.
So we're out of time, so definitely so many things that we could talk about, but definitely really inspired by hearing a bit more about your journey, getting to know both of you. Thank you again for your time and for all the books that you've been giving our audience. I'm quite jealous of you. It wasn't fast enough. But yeah, thank you again for everything. I hope you have a good rest of your time here.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, guys.